Hey everyone, and welcome to Talk ETFs. My name is Sumit Roy, and I'm Senior Analyst here at ETF.com. The topic of the day is thematic ETFs. If you know anything about the ETF industry, you know that this is a big growth area. There's seemingly a thematic ETF for everything. Electric vehicles, alternative energy, gaming, you name it, there's a thematic ETF for it. And you know who's a big player in the thematic ETF space? BlackRock. As the largest ETF issuer in the US, BlackRock has a ton of thematic ETFs. That's why it's my absolute pleasure to be speaking with Jay Jacobs, the head of thematics and active ETFs at BlackRock. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start off by asking you what the difference is between thematic ETFs and sector ETFs, because I know a lot of people get confused by this.
So sector ETFs have been around for a bit longer than thematic ETFs, so I'll start there. Sector ETFs, we like to use the acronym mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, which means that if you look across publicly traded equities, basically every stock is going to be classified as pertaining to one sector. That's great because you have 11 economic sectors. Every company is in one of those 11, and it creates a great toolbox for portfolio managers where across those 11 sectors, you have comprehensive exposure to US or global or whichever geography of capital markets through those sectors. The problem with that is, what do you do with companies that maybe have multiple business lines? You could think of an e-commerce company that sells a lot of stuff online to you, which is consumer discretionary, but also has a major cloud computing business, which is information technology. That company has to be placed in one sector. It cannot be placed in two. So that's a little bit challenging. Also, sectors tend to paint with a pretty broad brush. So if you look at the industrial sector, it might include aerospace and defense companies, industrial conglomerates, construction and engineering companies. Really, a lot of different companies are going to behave in very different ways, not necessarily kind of uniformly based off of macro conditions. So there's some great things about sector ETFs, but there's also some drawbacks. On the thematic investing side, thematic ETFs are designed from the bottom up to provide pure play exposure to a specific theme. That means they're looking all over the world, across sectors, across geographies, to find companies that might be leading in a theme like robotics and artificial intelligence, or electric and autonomous vehicles, or genomics, or cybersecurity. You name it, there's dozens of themes in the market today. The benefit of this approach is that it's not collectively exhaustive and it's not mutually exclusive. Some companies can be classified in several themes. If you create GPUs, graphics processing units, that is great for gaming, that is great for artificial intelligence, that's great for autonomous vehicles. So that GPU producer might be aligned with several different themes simultaneously. But secondly, it's not collectively exhaustive. So not every company is going to be included in a thematic ETF, and that's okay. Some companies are going to be disrupted by these themes and don't deserve to be in a thematic ETF. So by and large, you see some differences in this concept of mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. You can think of sectors as kind of these comprehensive tools, thematic being these more precise exposures to high growth areas of the market.
Now, Jay, I want to talk about a theme that seemingly everyone is talking about, and that's generative AI. Everyone's played around with ChatGPT, and they've probably seen really amazing models like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. What do you think about the generative AI theme, and is it investable today?
I'll take that question in two pieces. The first is, what do I think of the theme? Well, in thematic investing, we really like to think of this idea of adoption curves, which is kind of how quickly and how intensely is a theme being adopted across society or across the economy. There's really two important factors with adoption curves. One is how quickly is something being adopted? And the second is how big is the total addressable market? How many ways can this technology be used and monetized? When we look at ChatGPT, the rate of adoption is faster than any technology platform we've ever seen. About 100 million people have signed up for the platform in 2 months. That is as steep of an adoption curve as you can find out there. But secondly, the total addressable market keeps growing for this technology. It's only really been on the market for a few months where people have been able to play around with these different generative AI programs. And every day, it seems like people are discovering incredible new use cases in programming, in the legal field and writing contracts, in science and medicine, and even in financial services to help either create, kind of customized content or to sift through tons and tons of data that we're looking at on a regular basis. So the addressable market continues to expand for ChatGPT and for generative AI as a whole. This gets us really excited about the theme. This means that people are accepting this new theme across society, and there could be huge economic benefits when it's fully monetized. Now, from an investing perspective, I think this theme is really interesting as well, because if you look at some of these leading AI companies, they haven't necessarily IPO'd yet. you don't necessarily are able to invest, completely directly in these companies. Now, some of them are leading FANG stocks, big tech stocks that have, leading AI capabilities, or they're invested in AI companies. So you're getting some exposure through that. But secondly, you have to look at what are kind of the commonalities between these companies and who are some of the enablers of AI that will benefit no matter who wins. That's where we look at semiconductor stocks. As I was telling in the earlier example around GPUs that are used in artificial intelligence, the semiconductor companies that are building GPUs really benefit from whichever generative AI platform becomes the leader 5, 10, 20 years from now. So in thematic investing, I think it's really about this important concept of looking at the entire ecosystem. It's not just about the AI developers, the people creating the AI programs that we're using increasingly in our everyday lives, but it's also the AI enablers, the companies under the surface that are facilitating the massive amounts of processing power needed for AI to work the way it does.
Fantastic. And does BlackRock have any ETFs today that capture this theme?
We have IRBO. We affectionately pronounce it ERBO. That is the iShares Robotics and Artificial Intelligence Multi-Sector ETF. That is looking across the landscape, not just at artificial intelligence. We look at artificial intelligence developers and enablers. We also look at the robotics side of the equation for developers and enablers as well, really kind of capturing the entire ecosystem of AI, which is kind of controlling the mind of machines, and robotics, which is really controlling the body. Together, we think this theme is really powerful when you see all the different applications of automation.
Are there any other themes that investors are gravitating towards today?
If we think of robotics and AI as really kind of high-tech, growthy stocks and kind of growth-oriented themes, at the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing a lot of interest in value-oriented themes. And so one of those is U.S. infrastructure. This is owning construction engineering companies. This is materials companies. It's utilities companies that are operating and expanding U.S. infrastructure. Why is this a theme? Well, the U.S. infrastructure has been kind of dilapidated for several decades. It gets a C- from the American Society of Civil Engineers. And of course, just recently in 2021, we saw the passage of the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, a $1.2 trillion bill to rebuild and kind of reinvigorate U.S. infrastructure. So it took kind of sleepy old industries that have been underinvested in for decades and suddenly turned them into, really well positioned for long-term secular tailwinds as you see lots of federal spending coming into the space all at once. So we've seen a lot of interest in our fund IFRA, which is investing across the ecosystem of infrastructure enablers. Again, enablers and developers or operators in this case, the companies that are helping supply the build out of new infrastructure, as well as the operators that are running infrastructure today.
That's awesome. Well, Jay, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on.